further ado, I want to bring Eric on in, again, my partner. Eric, looking forward to today's conversation. How are you doing?
Doing really good. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing great, doing great. And I'm also very interested in today's conversation, especially with all the information and regulatory activity that's going on regarding hemp and the intoxicating CBD or THC product. So hope you guys have a great show and conversation, and onward and upwards.
Yes. Thank you so much. And yes, I think a really fascinating show. You know, everyone knows that these DeepRoots episodes are all about state expansion and moving into new markets. This one promises to talk a little bit about the future of what our industry might look like someday, or today, as the case may be, or maybe not tomorrow, but maybe again in the future. We don't really know. But we got a fantastic guest on to share with us. That's Aaron Nosbisch, who is the CEO and founder of BRÄZ. Aaron, come on in and join us, and let's kick this thing off.
Hey, you got me?
All righty, good stuff. All right, so Aaron, you got, like, this has been a whirlwind for you, and you know you're just getting started still, but it's been an absolute crazy growth story that I'm sure everyone's going to be fascinated to hear about. But let's just start with kind of how did you get this thing even started? What's the backstory on you and your founding of this business, and kind of give us the backstory, and then we'll jump into the kind of where we are today.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I've been in the e-commerce industry for quite a while, since I was 13 years old, and I'm 30 now. So although young, it's a long time in the e-commerce space, about 17 years of a traditional experience. So kind of been learning that game for a long time, and I've been in the feel-good industry for a while as well, scaling a brand, Monk, to be one of the fastest growing D2C businesses back in 2016, and then I launched a CBD brand in 2018 after the Farm Bill passed, and then shortly thereafter, I started an advertising agency for the hemp industry called Lucid, in the cannabis industry in a broader sense. And Lucid specialized in specifically getting social media ads live for hemp and cannabis brands, which is notoriously a very, very challenging thing to do. And so we had been working on that for years, and then for the last 5 years now, we have been leading the industry on cannabis social advertising. So we run 90% of all social media ads for hemp and CBD and THC now brands. And so that's kind of what really gave me a strong perspective and insight into the space that allowed me to see kind of from a bird's eye perspective of where the game was going, and what would be the most valuable to users, and what's been most effective. I also was one of the early consumers of hemp-derived THC beverages. Can came out in late 2022 with their hemp-derived THC beverage, and it became very clear after I started consuming some of their products that this is just fundamentally the future of social consumption. You know, alcohol is a net negative compound, although it might be a lot of fun, and it can be a great time. And some of the best times I've ever had are been drinking alcohol. It's rare that the juice is actually worth the squeeze when it comes to alcohol, where this non-alcoholic alternatives generally don't do much and provide all of the same sugar and calories without the fun. And cans and these other products, they were finally kind of fitting the market's need of a product that was non-alcoholic yet still fun. And so that's kind of what initially inspired the creation of BRÄZ, was these revolutionary products and our perspective and insight and strengths into the industry and experience of the space. And then we just innovated and looked for an opportunity to make it better. And I think we did just that.
So your company actually was Lucid. You started Lucid, which is a B2B provider to help other brands launch their products into the hemp market. And then you got to experiment with a lot of different scenarios there. And then you launched your own brand, and you came out of the gate with a kind of, I mean, where were you on the kind of the formulation side when you came out? Had you had experience on the formulation side, knowing what consumers already liked, or were you, because you have, obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about the lion's mane and things like that, but you came right out with what was your initial SKU set? This was what, 4/20, 2023, right?
Yeah.
What'd you come out with? What'd you launch with?
So we launched with, initially we launched with just one product, which was a 7.5 ounce, 2.5 milligram THC, 5 milligram CBD, and then an additional 5 milligram of minor cannabinoids, some unique minor cannabinoids, in fact, like CBT and CBL, CBC, so ones that people are not traditionally familiar with. And then also limonene as a terpene that we focused on, that we also nano-emulsified, which kind of gives it a more active profile. And then we did that with a lemon elderflower flavor. So we launched that initially, and then on 7/10 we launched our second product, which was our double strength, which was a 12 ounce double strength product, so kind of a single and double to kind of mimic the alcohol sling. And then we also released I forgot to mention, as well as the THC and the CBD and the minors, we also have lion's mane in our product. And that lion's mane is a fruiting body only, very active form that's been micronized. So it has very fast acting effects to it. So then we created a lion's mane only variation of our product as well that has no THC, no CBD, and only gives you the benefits of the lion's mane.
So we're talking a year ago, 4/20, right? 15 months ago, you launched. Share with everybody kind of, I mean, the most important metric is, revenue. Where are you and what are you doing in revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched it on 4/20. What's kind of funny about launching, you asked about formulation, so I'll just connect the dots here. I kind of had been experiencing a lot of different products on the market, so I kind of had more of an anecdotal experience with the effects of these products and what was good and what wasn't. And then I met a cool guy named Travis Duncan at Cannadelic Miami, which is a cannabis and psychedelic conference in Miami. And I was kind of spreading the word that I'm working on this THC beverage and looking for partners. And he had introduced me to these kind of unique forms of lion's mane and other active ingredients and his experience with formulation. So we partnered up in some small batch production in South Florida, and then created those initial batches. And then we actually did a pre-launch at Benzinga in 2023, in April 17th of 2023. So I think that's where me and you met originally, Eric, because I just literally had a bunch of silver cans that we put labels on in the hotel room and just passed them out at Benzinga. Yeah. So it's very grassroots per se, and kind of a funny way to go about it. It's like, our first customer base was the regulated marijuana industry. So we're bringing them some dry THC product that they consume on the floor. And so that was kind of our initial feedback. We made our initial sale there as well. But anyway, so that was about 15 months ago. Since then, we have been scaling primarily direct to consumer. And now in May, we did about $1.5 million in revenue, and with 40% of that being subscription. And then in April, we did that. In May, we're going to do about $1.8 million in revenue, again, with about 35% of that being monthly recurring. And probably 10% of our overall revenue is now retail, the majority D2C, which is kind of like an outlier thing. It doesn't really happen in beverage very often, or at least not ready to drinks.
So you bootstrapped this whole thing. I mean, you haven't taken an outside investment. You just got after it. I mean, how this is quite the journey. How did you, what do you think the real drivers of your success have been in terms of how do you measure your success? And how, I mean, come on, 1.8 million in May from 0 in April 2023 is insane. So kudos. But yeah, I mean, what are those key drivers? Why this take off?
Yeah, it's been wild. I was talking to a top shelf ventures, and they told me that we outperformed every alcohol brand in growth this past year, which is really cool. Or every new alcohol brand in growth, which is something I just didn't realize. So it is astronomical and special. I think obviously a key factor is that we have one of the first access to legal THC interstate across the nation. That's definitely a key factor, but I don't think it's the only factor, because there's a lot of brands that are doing that now and have been for a while. I think for us, it's been like a keen focus on doing what works and what we know. Like most brands in the space are focused on retail distribution, partnering up with distributors, expanding that way. We know direct to consumer. We know how to run online ads. We know how to connect with consumers. We know how to make beautiful brands. We know how to make great products. We know how to spread the message effectively online. So that's kind of, we've been leaning into that. We keep it small. We keep it lean. We keep it focused. I would profit centric out of the gate. We're not looking to raise a bunch of money and spend a bunch of money with the hopes that something works. We're very intentional with every dollar we spend to make sure that it brings back additional dollars. So that way we can further spread the product. And I also think it's a true and real dedication to a mission. Like, you know, the beautiful thing about running Lucid is like, we were financially successful a while ago. So it's like it's not really a money play for us running BRÄZ. It's an impact play. We want to reduce human suffering and maximize human potential by giving safe and effective alternatives through what we consider conscious compounds or therapeutic compounds that lead to net positive returns like BRÄZ. And so for us, it's like we actually want to help the world by making a product that we think is good for the world and getting it out there. And I think people can feel that in our product. I think they can feel that in our messaging. And I think you would amplify that with strong understanding of marketing and advertising. It's a healthy combination for rapid growth.
Nice. So what role did the consumer play in your success, right? Is this pent up demand? Is this just where we are right now with the, you know, have you shown the path to the future? And, you know, what's the consumer's role in all this?
I like there's a quote I liked about the future that you might get a kick out of, which is the future is obvious but unexpected. Like, you know, I think that this is pretty obvious now that we're all kind of seeing it. It's hemp derived THC, a federally legal form of cannabis that is low dose, tapped using the nano emulsion technology. I think this is a really important factor for those people who haven't tried hemp-derived THC beverage in the past. All hemp-derived THC beverages are nano emulsified, meaning that the particles inside them are really, really small. This is often why they also taste bitter. But that creates a different type of experience that's really nothing like an edible and nothing like smoking a joint. It's a very fast acting, so you feel the effects of the product within 5-10 minutes, depending on the particle size. And then it's a fast offset, so it goes away in about 60 to 90 minutes. That makes it comparable to drinking alcohol, like actually comparable to drinking alcohol, which is a major differentiation when you're talking about joints and edibles being a disruptor of the alcohol business. Like no one's really going to the bar and taking a few gummies and having a good time with their buddies that are drinking. You kind of end up in the corner, kind of sitting out, you know, being introspective, thinking about life. Or if you pull out a joint, you know, you get maybe blasted off really quickly and you become kind of offensive to the people who are not smoking around you because you smell like weed. You know, and so this is, and also like this, the strength of cannabis these days that is sold in dispensaries is so strong that it doesn't actually lend itself to a consumption behavior that's similar to alcohol, even though that the majority of the industry treats it like it should be. And so, you know, I think part of this is a lot of people in the space don't even use cannabis. And so it's like, you don't have this firsthand experience of being a consumer. How are you supposed to sell to them? And so to your point of like, how significant of a role is the consumer? I mean, they're the only role. Like, you know, like we're building a product for ourselves. We're building a product for the cannabis consumer, who we're building a product for the people who kind of see the negative effects of alcohol and want an alternative. And I'm not trying here to demonize alcohol, but I do think that, you know, as a society, we're waking up to the fact that it's generally a toxic compound that leads to a lot of negative things, and there needs to be better alternatives for people to feel better. And so, like, you know, I think according to our post-purchase surveys, about 35% of our daily sales come from word of mouth. So I do think a key factor in our growth is people enjoying our products and spreading the word with others. And I also don't think people have experienced cannabis in a way that's been so familiar and safe and capped in low dose, like fast acting and fast offset. Like this is a very safe way to consume cannabis that has traditionally not been available. So I think the real question becomes then, it's like, why has dispensary beverage sales not succeeded? Yeah, because theoretically it should work the same, but it doesn't work the same. You know, dispensary beverage sales are less than 2% of total market share. So like, why is it not working the same there? And this kind of goes to like the broader question of like, well, who is going into dispensaries to buy products? You know, and the reality is, I think, like for me to go to a dispensary, I need to go find a blacked out windowed private room off some shady street corner, and many times, not always, but many times, I need to walk into with a guy standing with a gun in front, and he's going to take my ID to check me in, fill out some paperwork, give me all my information, to then go to a desk where it smells and I'm very confused of what I'm buying, to a guy who maybe knows what he's talking about, to introduce me to a drug. You know, like that's a very scary experience for my mom. Like, she does not want to do that, you know, and I'm sure your mom would not want to do the same thing. And so like, so then what do we do? Like, there has to be a safe, clear, obvious path that allows for trial and entry in a way that's actually safe for the consumer. That's not going to put them on the moon. That's not going to make them paranoid. That's not going to make them fearful. That the labeling in the package can clearly talk about what it is, and there should be some regulation in there to ensure that that's accurate. But this is what I think is the key aspect of why we're so successful and the rest of the hemp industry is so successful, is we tapped into something that the cannabis industry has been blinded to due to the overregulation of the marijuana regulated space, is that like mainstream consumers will try cannabis if there is a safe and friendly form factor that is familiar to them, but they're not going to do so through the current channels. The current channels facilitate high strength consumption of cannabis, which is a very niche audience that doesn't really represent the broader community of people who would be interested in using cannabis.
So you know, like you said, the consumers really have voted, and what I think is really interesting is that there's two things that you kind of went at here. One is the interest in, you know, a low dose, fast acting experience that is different than even, you know, gummies are you know, technically they could be low dose or you can eat a half, but there's not a lot of nano. There is nano in some gummies, but that's different. But I think what you touched on that I think is interesting. So we understand why the consumer is doing it, but you have a direct line of conversation with your consumers. You have a lot of subscription. We'll get into that in a second. So I'm curious what the difference is between how you draw this distinction between the consumer being uncomfortable walking into retail versus the consumer just being in Texas where they can't get access, or like how do you look at that? I mean, how would you distinguish between those two phenomena? Is 99% of your online revenue from states that are that banned adult use cannabis, or how does that work? And how do you know through those conversations with the consumers that they're so worried about going into retail?
Yeah, it's a great question and an important distinction. I actually, the majority of our revenue comes from states that it's pretty healthy blend actually, but I'd say like the big states for cannabis, no matter who you are, or is California, Illinois, Florida, New York, and Texas. So some places like Texas, they don't have mainstream access to dispensaries, so that's a key factor for the hemp space. But then, California obviously has more access than anybody, and yet there's still a huge consumption a segment of our market. So I think it's not so much about. I don't think it's so much just about getting access to THC where people can't get access. I think the reality is that if people want access to weed, they'll figure out how to get access to weed. You know, there's plenty of consumption methods paths to getting access to cannabis. I think that especially for this, I think it's important to hemp and THCA and cannabis drinks, they all get kind of bunched up together. And, there's an argument to be said that they should be bunched up together because none of it should be illegal in the first place. But it is important to dissect a little bit when talking about the individual. So just speaking about beverage for a minute, hemp-derived THC beverages, it's a different medium that hasn't been really available before. And so speaking about BRÄZ a little bit more directly here, it's when you discover BRÄZ, you watch an ad about the benefits of the product, or your friend comes to you and says, hey, I tried this new drink. It's really awesome. It's super safe. It's super subtle. It's like a beer, but it feels better and you don't feel sick or hungover the next day. So then you go to our website and you get this beautiful presentation of what the product is, or you look at the can and you get to read and hear and understand what it all is. You see the lab test, you see the COAs, you get this validation. But then the key factor, you go to the review section, you see thousands of reviews of other consumers just like you who were hesitant to try this product and then tried it. And then you also find out that it's available to ship directly to your door, regardless if you're in a regulated state or not regulated state. These are all, I think, the myriad of factors that lead into a much more comforting consumption experience. And it's also familiar. This is how we buy other things online. This is how we review and make judgment calls on other choices in our life when it comes to CPG products and consumables. And the thing is, cannabis industry is really in the silo, and so I don't think it's, obviously access is definitely a key factor, but I don't think it's the only factor. I think it's social validation, social acceptance. I think it's word of mouth. I think the consumption medium, like drinking something, is so baked into our DNA. Like, you know, what do we do as humans? We eat and we drink. So it's like this process of sipping on something. Sipping is also an important thing. Like if I have a martini and I can sip on it, I don't have to chug the whole martini, or I don't have to take a big drag of that martini. It's like I can have just a little bit and I can titrate my dosage to where I want, to exactly where I feel. And if I have that fast onset, I can actually control that in a deeper and more meaningful way. I think these are all the factors that lead to hemp-derived THC being so successful. And this is exactly why it's not successful in the regulated market. And so, like, you know, and I'd say one more thing on this real quick, Eric, which is that, like, you know, there's a fear as a cannabis operator, that a regulated cannabis operator or marijuana operator, that, oh, well, hemp-derived THC is going to steal our market share. Like they're gonna, but the thing is that that market share does not exist inside of at least the hemp-derived THC beverage. That market share does not exist inside of the regulated dispensaries. It's less than 2% of sales. So what we know is, like, this is actually like what people actually sell at these regulated dispensaries is flower and edibles. So what we can kind of see is that this is actually expanding access to cannabis at a broader scale and introducing people to this plant that might not have been introduced to it before, which then is becoming a gateway to them going into a dispensary and feeling more comfortable to try flower or to try edibles, which ultimately just expands the market bigger and better for all of us. And this is what I think Curaleaf has started to come up onto, and GTI, and 1906 is a great example. I think you're gonna have, like, these guys have kind of figured out that hemp doesn't necessarily have to be a detractor to our business. In fact, it might be a massive expansion into mainstream culture for our business, although it does need some safety and regulation support in order to build out that infrastructure.
We're going to come back to that, because we can't have this discussion without talking about pending or current and pending regulation. But let's go into something else that I think is still on this same vein here. CPG is an industry that's built on, and certainly online e-commerce, if you will, is built on certain metrics, CPG metrics, cost of customer acquisition, lifetime value, retention, all this, right? Share with us some of these metrics that you have. I mean, you have, I think, a subscription business that you said was somewhere between 30 to 40% of your sales. That's nuts. But give us a little background on some of these traditional CPG metrics that you can that you've enabled with the BRÄZ model.
Totally. Something about us, Eric, is like we're building the company in the public. We think it's a good service to the cannabis industry and hemp industry overall, as well as people. So we're very open with all these things. So I'm open book for all these things. Our CACs, or our cost to acquire a customer, is somewhere between $30 and $60 depending on the channel, and our average order value is somewhere between $45 and $90 depending on the channel. So you can kind of see where that evens out to be somewhere between like a 1.5 and a 3x return on ad spend. So ROAS, or another way you could look at that is media efficiency rate, so MER. Those are kind of like some key metrics that we're looking at. There's a quote I like in the advertising and CPG business, which is he who can pay the most per customer wins, which is kind of a it's like, if you can afford the CAC and you have a good enough product to drive the lifetime value, then you can essentially buy the market share. So the trouble is that what we saw in D2C of this last year is people thought that if they just bought the customer, that was enough to win the game, but it's not. You actually have to have a great product, and you have to have a great relationship with the customers, and you have to be able to really nurture that customer over the lifetime. So we're finding incredible lifetime value on our customers. We're finding a 30% opt-in for 25 to 30% opt-in for subscription on first-time orders, and we're finding somewhere about 30 to 40% of our overall revenue monthly is coming from subscription. We're seeing a big drop off from month one to month two. I think a key factor for that is we're a very expensive product, probably the most expensive beverage in the space at the moment. Part of that is we're just very intentional to use very top tier ingredients. And we also have to make the unit economics of direct to consumer work, which require a certain level of AOV in order to support the CAC. And so So a lot of people opt in for a subscription to get a hefty discount on our product, and then they may opt out to kind of game the system. But we spend a lot of time and energy and effort towards nurturing that customer through email flows, which is an owned media channel, in order to kind of push them from month 1 to 2, 3, 4 We also invite them to clubs and send like insider communities, so that way we can kind of create a deeper relationship with them and kind of network on that. And then, but our LTV, so far it's been breaking every benchmark that I've ever seen in D2C. It's like, I don't have the exact data, but it's something like, if I had to guess, it's something like for a 12-month cycle of a consumer, they buy somewhere at like 3.2 times, which is just insane. Like average would be like 1.4, and so we're somewhere in like the 3. I'd say 2.5 to 3 to 3, 2.5 to 3 is probably closer to where we're at. So it's pretty significant. And this is in the early stages. Now, a key factor of that is THC is a very sticky ingredient. It's a very sticky product. Like people try this product, they use it. It's like coffee, you feel it, and then you want more of it. So you come back and you realize, hey, this is not really taking anything away from me. In fact, maybe it's giving me a lot more life because it's leading to an alternative to the thing that is taking life from me, which can be anything, it could be alcohol or other drugs or substances. And so that's kind of how we see it.
But there's probably a lot of people out there looking at this and rather envious of what you've done. And I think where one of the major factors here is you have centralized manufacturing and you ship to almost all states. And then you have this kind of, subscription model. So I can only imagine that on the production side, and there's no middleman, so it's direct to consumer, that your margins must be pretty healthy. Can you share just kind of, where you are on a margin profile?
Yeah, absolutely. First, just to address, on the margin profile, about 60% net and about 15%, I'm sorry, 15% net and 60% gross. And, the ads costs are a big factor there. So we're spending a lot of money to scale. And so theoretically, if we pull that back, then the net should increase probably closer to 25 to 30. So that's pretty healthy. I think we're a little too expensive, to be honest. I think if we were a little bit cheaper, I think we would be growing a lot faster than we are right now. So we're going to be working on some price tests to kind of validate that. I think that but the thing, as I say, is like there's a unit economics need to make direct to consumer work. Like these are beverages, they're heavy products. We're sending a 6-pack of 12 ounces. That's a pretty significant size package to be shipping across the country. And so so there's certain like unit. It's less about even the gross margins of the product. It's more about like what does the company need to look like from our direct to consumer experience to make it effective. And I think that's what, like, it's easy to kind of think that we're just selling weed on the internet, and so like, oh, we're so successful. It's really not that. It's 17 years of direct to consumer e-commerce experience blended with really personal, deep understanding of this plant and care about it and care about the people, and an amazing team who also feels the same. That Steve Jobs has that quote. It always surprised him how long instant success takes, years and years in the making. But I would also say one thing about the invidious part. Like, we build everything that we do wide open to the public. As you can see here with me communicating with here, like I'm not hiding anything. Like, here's our playbook, here's how we're doing it. And hey, I would like to help you do it. And I would like to help every other cannabis operator in the regulated space do it, and every other hemp player. We have an agency that does this as well. And we help brands get, 1906. So I think you're gonna have Peter on next week. They launched their hemp derived THC business with us at BRÄZ, and we scaled to, I think I'm not sure if it's more significant than their regulated business, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty close if it's not. And it's definitely way more profitable than their regulated business. And so and that's just one of many of the industry leaders that we've helped scale. Like, that's the thing. It's like, this isn't like a black wall guarded, hey, we gotcha cannabis type situation. This is really hey, there's a bigger opportunity that we should all be aware of. Let me draw as much attention to it as I can so that we can all play. And maybe that's a little bit to our detriment because we'll introduce competition, but I recognize that we're building on the shoulders of giants, and that this is not just something that we've invented. It's something that we've accelerated and furthered, and I'm grateful for that opportunity.
So what is the shift in what your business looks like, both from a revenue perspective, profitability perspective, when you hit the traditional distribution, traditional non-cannabis, traditional, like the total wine, right? You start to go into total wines. Obviously now you have a reseller, you have massive inventory requirements. What does that margin profile look like? And is it just, does it come with a 10x lift over time in revenue because that's so much bigger than online, or is online still going to be the driver for you?
I think that the online is a market penetration opportunity, and I think it's more scalable than it's ever been, and especially for beverage. But I ultimately think that the real game is played in retail. Like, I don't think anyone could deny that, at least today. And I don't know if that will be the case forever, as better infrastructure gets developed and the internet, evolves. But like, here's a quote, or here's a reference that might help put it in perspective. Monster Energy, I'm sure you're familiar, it's one of the best performing stocks of all time.
Yep.
They have a $60 billion market cap right now. Monster Energy sells green water with caffeine in it. Like, how big does cannabis in a can get, or cannabis and mushrooms in a can, like we're doing, or other functional beverages? I mean, you look at people like Hop Water. Hop Water started as a non-alcoholic beer or a water company. Now they're an adaptogen and nootropic company. Like, this game is much, much bigger than people realize. It's much bigger than I think I realize, and I think it's massive. So I would say I think that although I think D2C is going to allow us to outpace the rest of the market and potentially take the leadership position in this category, ultimately it's going to be a game of rapid retail distribution. And I think kind of balancing both of these is going to be an important factor, because once there is a shelf, I mean, Eric, I'm sure you've walked into a liquor store. How the hell do you pick what to drink? It's like there's 1,000 products on the shelf, and it's so you have legacy brands who have been advertising and marketing to the consumers since the end of Prohibition, like Jack Daniels and some of these others. So they have kind of this, or Coca-Cola in the soft drink space doing a similar thing. Like, I think that what we're doing online is akin to that back then. I think that we're starting a consumer relationship and a marketing and awareness campaign. I don't even really like using that word. I think marketing is kind of a jaded word. We're just trying to have a direct relationship with our customers at scale. And then I hope that the retail becomes access points to that relationship. And I hope it becomes new points of entry into a relationship with us. And I think that that's going to be comparable to what Jack Daniels and Coca-Cola did in yesteryear. So, but ultimately, yeah, retail distribution, that's where this game gets really big and really real. And, when it comes to like the regulated space, like we want to wait to see how long that plays out. I mean, it's a decade at least, and it's probably more than that. It's probably 2 decades. Like, there's not that much benefit for the government to unlock THC in cannabis. In fact, there's a lot of deep and old legislation to prevent it. So, like, this is a path for all of us, especially in beverage, to get access to that now, which I think is
so interesting. If you had started this business at retail, like many of the cannabis beverage players have done, the amount of information coming back to you about your consumers, what they like, their preferences, feedback, the relationship would have been elusive. But you started on the online side, so you've got this vast database of not only consumers, but information, preferences, and all this. I don't want to go so far as to say, well, maybe, is it a competitive moat for you when you go to retail? Do you feel like, because at the end of the day, if you're not moving, you're yanked, right? Total Wine doesn't care.
Exactly.
They're going to sell, they're going to put whoever's product sells the most on there. So is that a competitive moat for you to be better at Total Wine, or how do you see that?
Yeah, so we're not carried in Total Wine currently, and we're the only large player who's not carried at Total Wine currently. And they told us recently that they're not interested in carrying us, actually. So I don't really understand why, and I'm looking to get additional information. So that's kind of like a curious snippet. But I think that I wonder, is the D2C opportunity that we're creating a competitive moat, or is it a threat to some of these businesses? Because, like in one sense, it's like if they introduce the product to them, there's 2 ways to see it. Like if they introduce the product to a new consumer, but then they go buy online and stop buying at Total Wine, that would be a threat to Total Wine. But I think the correct way to see it, and the way I see it, and I think the way that you're suggesting as well, is that, like, for me to say that BRÄZ is available at Total Wine nationwide, we would instantly become the top mover at Total Wine. There's just no doubt about it. Like, we just maybe comparable to Can, but like we just have enough audience and enough reach and limited enough access to buy our product in store that if it's available at Total Wine, it would drive more velocity than any other THC product on the shelf. And that's nothing against the THC products; they're great. Like cans, I'm sure moving a ton. Cycling products, I'm sure moving a ton. Cantrip's doing great. Like, but we just have a lot of interest and desire to buy this directly at the store. I think that could be one factor. The other factor is, we're a functional beverage first, a cannabis beverage second. And that's an important delineation in our brand and the rest of this industry. It's like we use THC as an ingredient to create a functional experience rather than THC being the bread and butter of our entire brand. So what I mean by that is, like, on the side of our can it says microdose cannabis, because it's a small dose of cannabis and mushrooms in the can. I think maybe Total Wine's a little hesitant to put mushrooms in the can on the shelf next to the THC beverages at this early stage to prevent liability to. So it's hard for me to assume, and I don't want to make an ass of myself by doing so. But but the point is, mass distribution will be available to these categories sooner than later if regulation facilitates it. And if that does happen, then yeah, when those doors open, I think that the value that we can add on the DUC, it's less about knowing our customer data, I think, so inherently, because like we leverage less of that than maybe you would think, because it's really kind of like a psychographic of consumers who just want a better way to feel better. But I would say, I do think that the knowledge that we know that we have 15,000 customers in Minnesota that are ready to go pick up our BRÄZ at whatever major box retailer is willing to carry us. Like, I think that is a competitive moat in the sense that we're going to be able to drive faster velocity than other brands. I don't think that that's exclusive to us, but I do think that that's something that we've garnered and built by taking our approach. The risk is if we don't do that fast enough and there becomes additional regulation that makes D2C more challenging, then it could threaten our business model. So we do have to move quick on that front.
So we're going to jump into a little discussion in a second here on regulatory and kind of talk about the alcohol industry. But we do have a couple of questions that I think are relevant in this vein here in terms of online. The first one, kind of general: should cannabis brands focus on SEO or ads first?
It's a great question. If you, by cannabis brands, I'm assuming you mean the broader definition of hemp and marijuana. I would say
let's go with that.
Yeah, I would say probably the answer is both. I hate to say it. It's like, the reason is, like, SEO is going to take you 3 to 6 months to kind of turn up. And so the easy way to think about SEO is, like, start making quality content like we're making right here today with Eric and the team. It's like you want SEO. The whole game of SEO is actually just about great quality content. You don't need to gamify the system. You just need to make quality content, written, digital, video, whatever, posted on your website. If you just keep doing that and you do some basic optimization, which any basic SEO provider can solve for you, that's a 3 to 6 month wind up. And just creating the content is a good way to start. It's not going to make you enough cash quickly enough for me to say it's the thing you should do first, but it is the thing you should do ultimately. When it comes to like quick cash and filling the faucet, filling the pipes of your business, ads is the fastest way to do that. The trouble with ads is, like, oftentimes you got to pay an agency, like my agency Lucid, or hire a full-time person to bring in to run your ads. So those costs can get expensive. So it's, I would recommend starting with some capital or raising some capital to do so. But then after you have that capital, creating really compelling and interesting creative. Like, for us, I literally grabbed my phone.
Uh-oh. Let's see if Aaron comes back. We lost him for a moment there. Hang in there, folks. We will be patient and await Aaron's return because he's rolling. And take the moment here. We got another question queued up, and we'll have and please fire them through. We lost you there for just a moment there, Aaron, but you're back. We see you.
Loud and clear. You got me?
There we go. Where you're back.
Okay, sorry, I need to cut it out there. I was just saying, make quality content that connects with people and post it on social and run it in ads.
I think it's a similar probably answer to the next question that I think is also, I'm not 100% clear, but it says, aside from the success and high conversion of direct to consumer BRÄZ is seeing from social, online, and digital marketing, what types of trade marketing within your brick and mortar distributions are driving awareness and conversations?
Great question. Like trade marketing, well, I mean, there's two ways I understand trade marketing. I mean, like retail or like event activation is the first, or trade shows is the first thing I think of. But then maybe trade marketing in the sense of like traditional forms of marketing. So I would say on the first aspect of it, well, maybe they're saying like we're, you know, I go to Benzinga. Like I love Benzinga. I love the people at Benzinga. It's where I met Eric. It's where I met some really cool, smart people. Like there's some amazing cannabis people that know so much there, and that I want to be part of that conversation. So like we go to Benzinga and we spread our products out and we try to show the industry a bigger vision of what this could look like for all of us. And so I like to be at trade shows like that. We try to activate at events. So we saturate our product at festivals or any, like BRÄZ is trying to be associated with anyone who's becoming more. So any type of events around biohacking or life extension or wellness or fun, you know, festivals, music festivals are a great example, like things where people are going out and having fun. Jesse Itzler, whose wife is Sarah Blakely, you know, he was a very smart guy. He runs a festival called Running Man. And so like we're involved with that, where people go out and run marathons. Like I don't want people drinking beers when they run marathons. I want them drinking BRÄZ when they run marathons. Like that should be, it's a better way. It's less harmful, it's more generative, and it facilitates what they're trying to do. So it's like, that's the kind of association that I like to have in a traditional sense in that way. And then on the marketing, you know, side, like email marketing is huge for us. Like, you know, we really lean into email marketing. We really lean into social media, just posting on social media, and just traditional forms of content, I'd say, and the word of mouth. Like, how can we facilitate word of mouth? Incentivizing our customers to spread the word through affiliate. So these are kind of things that we do in a more traditional way outside of ads.
Nice. Great answer. I'd like to just talk about a little bit, obviously, we want to touch on the regulatory environment. There's been some recent news, but just in general, you know, there's a lot of people in the adult use cannabis market that, you know, who feel that hemp derived beverages, or just hemp derived anything for that matter, are taking advantage of this loophole in the Farm Act and, you know, damaging the industry where they put all this time and energy into building something. And then you come in over the top. It truly is over the top, and you know, change the game, and it's not fair, right? And we even have, it's really hard to get a sense for where the industry, I'm talking adult regulated, you know, THC, but industry is on this topic, because there's kind of conflicting messages being sent. But let's start with, like, you know, Aaron, you're gaming the system, this loophole, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, why are you taking it to all these THC guys that have worked so hard? What's your response to that?
Yeah, man, I think that I don't think that we're gaming the system at all. I think that we're looking for a path that allows to create true and free access to this plant for everyone, the businesses, the people, the consumers, everyone. And I think that that's actually, if you look at the roots of the regulated industry, which I have, and I've spent time with the people, like, you know, it's always been about creating fair access to this plant. Even the medical program, like that was about giving access to patients, but it was also about a vehicle of creating recreational programs ultimately. I mean, is that not how the whole medical and recreational program rolled out state by state? You first roll out a medical program that then leads to a recreational program that then leads to maybe a decriminalized program. It's ultimately the vision. Like, this is just a faster path to what everyone's already baked in. And like, when it comes to like fairness on this kind of like global scale, I mean, if you look at the regulated marijuana industry, is it really fair? I mean, like, there's probably 3 or 4 players who run the whole space. And by the way, those 3 or 4 players are all in hemp now, like, and doing so before the rest of the licensed cannabis operators are doing so. And without that knowledge, you know, and like Cureleaf, I know they just posted up a press release saying that they're in the hemp space now. I know GTI is in the hemp space now. Like, these guys are in the space. Like, and these are also the guys that run the majority of the regulated cannabis business and put forward efforts to prevent other people from controlling market share. You know, you see this with people like Trulieve, and I'm not, and this isn't like anything against these people. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of them. It's not about, in my perspective, it's really important that both business operators and consumers have free and fair access to this plant. And although the efforts that have been invested to create that access through the regulated channel have been sincere, they haven't worked. They haven't worked at all. It's a very corrupt industry that is ran by a bunch of monopolists that are trying to monopolize the industry and prevent smaller players from accessing it. It's working with government officials to ensure that, although not always effectively. And the money system within the industry is broken as well. I mean, look at 280E. Like, a business can't deduct their own taxes. What the hell is that? how is anyone supposed to be successful in this space? And then, the investments dried up in cannabis. The regulations and the stipulations create no real opportunity for profit. It's a rigged system out of the gate, and the only people who are going to win in it are the governing class, the monopolistic class, and that's very unfortunate. And I think that what the hemp beverage, the hemp industry abroad, I think it really facilitates the opportunity for free and fair access, and I think it's worth us rallying behind it. It doesn't also eliminate the cannabis regulated marijuana space at all. Like, that can still exist at scale in all the ways that it is, but it does allow for a market expansion opportunity that allows everyone an equal and fair chance to play in this space. So it's easy to resist that in this, like, oh, that's not fair. They didn't pay the licensing fee and they didn't do the thing I did. And I totally respect and understand that. But also, like, if we really look at our core motivations of, like, what are we trying to do as a community? What are we trying to do as an industry in the broader sense? What are we trying to do for people? If it's truly about creating a free and fair and open market to this plant, that's supposed to be safe and regulated. Don't get me wrong. It's not about careless activity here. It's about safety and effective access. If that's truly the goal, is the current regulatory environment truly the path? I think if everyone took a hard look, I don't think anyone would say it is.
Well, I guess we're about to find out, right? I mean, obviously recent news of trying to, I mean, I think it's fair to say there's a pretty decent chance that, hemp derived THC will be, there'll be changes to the farm bill, right? So, obviously some risk at your business right now. Well, how do you see that playing out? And I mean,
it's less risk.
There is a doomsday scenario, I suppose, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So, I think that the tone of the conversation has changed recently because so what happened recently is Representative Miller put in an amendment the night before a vote, submitted an amendment that removed ingestible or intoxicating and ingestible hemp from the farm bill. The next day it was voted on in block, which means alongside other initiatives regarding puppy mills and solar panels to be voted on. And then it was voted on via voice. So it wasn't roll call. People didn't submit votes. The bill, it was just a yay or nay, and there was amendment yay or there was two representatives that pushed against it, saying that shouldn't be in there. And so the thing is, like, that was like a cue. I'm just making sure I'm connected. You hear me okay, Eric?
I can hear you. You're froze, but we can hear you.
Gonna wait till my. Okay, I can hear you now too, but let me see if I'm back now.
Yeah,
back for you.
Yeah. Verbally, yes. But you're making your point. It's all very well.
Okay. So I'm gonna continue my point there. It's like Miller submitted this amendment. Miller submitted this amendment. It went in the darker night, got voted on in the morning in an unfair way, got added to the House bill. So there's this, oh my gosh, farm bill is going to be shut down, the hemp's going to be excluded. But the reality is that this was just like a very fly-by-night strategic activity. This was a very fly-by-night strategic activity by political maneuverists. And the reality is that was just the first stage of the farm bill getting developed. There's that first House bill, the Senate has to make a bill. They then go through, they then compare those together and then work alongside each other between the Senate and the House to negotiate the points. And then that goes to the president to then get signed into law. So, like, it's easy to harp on the bandwagon of, oh my gosh, the farm bill is like hemp's getting closed down, blah, 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 because of this notice. But the reality is there's significant industry, a $28 billion industry within hemp. and significant lobbying power and significant players like alcohol who are very interested in this area staying open. And we are the very, very first inning of a 9-inning game when it comes to legislation. And that first inning win came from like a short bunt that got ran to first base. So it was not really a fair play in the first. And so I think in short, it's like, it's easy to kind of write the narrative that the farm bill is getting closed down, and there's a lot of people who want that to be true, and I understand why. Although I think it's a misguided perspective, but the reality is that that's not actually what's happening here. The reality is that we're just the beginning of a very long legislative process that has very opposing views on both sides that are going to have to get negotiated through legislators and companies and politicians and whatnot. And I think we'll see where that goes. I would say, though, there's probably an important delineation between THCA flower, which is really probably the real threat to cannabis dispensaries in the regulated space, if anything, versus this hemp-derived Delta-9. So the DEA released a statement shortly thereafter that said, you know, that THCA is considered THC because THCA is based on its decarbonated status, which so like once you heat it, it turns into THC. Thus, it makes it a Schedule 1, maybe soon Schedule 3, exactly, compound. So the point of that is like, but they also said in that same statement that Delta-9 THC below 0.3% from hemp is considered hemp and is legal and not regulated by the DEA. So there is this delineation from the federal level of the DEA saying that there's this difference between what THCA is and what HG9 is. And whether or not people agree with that or don't, I'm generally an anti-prohibitionist across the board. But whether people agree with that or not, there is a delineation between what we're talking about here. And that's a super important delineation, because if this conversation is about should THCA flower be available at scale, that's a kind of a different conversation than should low-dose hemp THC products be available at scale to expand all of our market share collectively into mainstream consumers in a safe and fair way.
Fair enough. The narrative has been for years, up until maybe a year or so ago, that the alcohol industry saw the writing on the wall, and they were doing everything they can to at least slow down any kind of THC legalization, blocking it, lobbying against it, trying to protect their industry and whatnot. Yet recently, it's pretty clear that, and I don't want to call this an end around, but the alcohol industry seems to be very supportive of hemp-derived beverages. Now there's money to be made there for them. What are you hearing about the entrance of big alcohol into this game, and how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, in short, I kind of think of it like, alcohol needs a growth category. Alcohol sales have been declining for a while, and like the people who really experience the butt of that weight is the distributors. Like they're selling less products. Like it's less on the brand side, even it's on the distributors that are selling less products. So they need a growth category. They need something to move the needle, to continue. Like that's where these businesses thrive. They operate on such small margins that you have to continually be growing in order to be successful and profitable at those small margins. And so I think that the non-alcoholic wave has come, and I think it's not having the lasting value that I think people thought it would, which is where the functional and experience-focused game is going to become the highlight. And THC beverage does that. THC beverage and nano-emulsified products, it also facilitates that. So I think that alcohol is waking up to the fact that THC beverages looks, feels, acts, but doesn't harm like alcohol does in a safer and better way, and that it's a massive opportunity. And I think that they are interested in becoming a part of that. And I think they realize it's not taking away from the market share, but actually adding to their market share, which is the same revelation that I hope cannabis regulated wakes up to, is that it adds to the market share. It doesn't take away from the market share. It expands the category. And so I think the real kind of conversation happening right now is like, okay, do we have big brother regulated cannabis who's saying, no, we can't have this, let's get it shut down? Or do we have older and bigger brother alcohol who's saying, hey, maybe that's something we want to support and help? So now the question becomes like, do we have this fight of titans where we have big regulated cannabis and big regulated alcohol argue over who, like, which ultimately, if alcohol really wants to win, they're going to win that game. Like, they're significantly bigger, they have way more money, so if that's the game we're going to fight against, like, they're going to win. There's no doubt about that. By the way, big tobacco exists still, and they're looking for a growth category, so it's only a matter of time before they enter this category. So then we have this kind of like clash of the gods, clash of these titans. So what is the answer? I don't think it's about prohibitionist style activity and war of drug mongering. What about the children? What about the children? There's ways to solve for this. Age gating, clean, effective labeling, clarity on who and where they can sell. Like there's ways to do this that don't create the yucky, restrictive infrastructure that prevents small businesses and social equity from existing. There's ways to do this that prioritizes the small business owner and the entrepreneur and the consumer ultimately above all else. That regardless of whether cannabis is involved or alcohol is involved or big tobacco is involved or Walmart's involved, that everyone can win. And so that's kind of like the voice that I'm trying to champion forward. So I do think that alcohol is very interested. I think they're going to get in quickly. I think there's a few things that can stop that at this point. I think that cannabis's adoption, and I think that if everyone stopped taking this perspective of competition and started looking for this perspective of collaboration, that there could be this massive opportunity to make the world a better place for all of us and create a really great new capital market and growth category for the country and for the world. I hope to facilitate that activity because it's far more interesting than this is divisive behavior that gets played out in the market.
I have about 15 more questions for you, but that was an extremely elegant way to end this episode of DeepRoots, Aaron. Fascinating stuff, amazing achievements. And obviously, yeah, you're not lucky. You've been working hard on this for 15 years and you're reaping the benefits. Let's hope we can all, I hope this is a win-win for everybody, and appreciate you coming on today. So kudos to what, and everybody, this man joined us was on his honeymoon. So, it is, so double kudos for that. But thanks so much, Aaron. Thanks for coming on. And everybody, please come back in 30 days when we'll be on with Peter Barson from 1906, having the same discussion. So great stuff. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your week. And see you next time on DeepRoots.